Hello, my name is Benaiah Wright, and today I would like to talk about knowledge management and being an expert teacher, and how being an expert teacher may require overcoming the barrier of having highly specialized skills. Wow, now this slide may seem surprising to you. How does it make you feel? I know it's counterintuitive, but it may surprise you to find out that your expertise and deep knowledge of a subject is not always enough to inspire learning. Let's take, for example, a very complicated task that we all take for granted, driving. You're a skilled teacher, but could you teach someone how to drive? Better yet, could you develop curriculum that would ensure a reasonable percentage of your students would learn how to drive every time they took your course? What about riding a bike? Something I'm sure we all know how to do. This is a task that I would argue is more physiologically complex than even driving a car. How exactly do you ride a bike? Would anyone like to volunteer and explain this task to us? It's really easy, but we are such experts at it that it can be very hard to explain to someone who may have never done it. Now, these two examples are illustrations of how our knowledge and expertise in the task do not necessarily translate to the facilitation of learning. So what does that mean for you? Well, my goal today is to give you some tools to break down the knowledge barrier to being an effective teacher. So first of all, what are some of our goals of teaching? Well, we want to transform students' thinking. We want to facilitate learning. We want to ensure an acquisition of useful knowledge. We want to help them develop skills. What does it mean for us? We want to become expert teachers, not just experts. So we're going to tackle the challenge of teaching despite the knowledge barrier by following this short outline. First, we're going to discuss why being knowledgeable is actually important to learning. Then we're going to discuss knowledge versus teaching skills. And then finally we're going to discuss finding that balance, being knowledgeable and being a skilled teacher. So let's begin our discussion by defining knowledge and what it means to us. Well, in their book, Managing Knowledge, Stephen Little and Tim Ray define knowledge as a flux mix of framed experience, values, contextual information, and expert insight that provides a framework for evaluating and incorporating new experiences and information. Thus, for our purposes, knowledge and knowledge acquisition is the building block for becoming an expert. Like I said in the intro, we don't just want to be experts at being knowledgeable. We want to put our knowledge to good use. Let's take, for example, musicians, athletes, doctors. These people have a body of knowledge that allows them to perform in their respective fields of expertise. Now, knowledge is very important to us as teachers, as it is to any professional. It's the means by which we apply our specialized skills. Now, this is not at all an exhaustive list, but knowledge helps us with our pattern recognition, with solving complex problems within a reasonable amount of time and with little error. We develop a deep perception of the principle of our specialized area versus the superficial perception that is generally associated with novices who see things in unrelated items. We also are driven by a self-discipline and self-regulation that allows us to recognize systemic problems within a given process. Now, knowledge and appearing knowledgeable is important to us as facilitators because despite the challenges, students do value knowledgeable teachers. If a student perceives us as inexperienced or incompetent, their motivation to learn from us will be diminished and our effectiveness as facilitators will fail. Well, quickly, as an example, I took a course, Art History in America, or should I say Architecture in America. My undergrad studies were in art history, and by my senior year, my cohorts and I had built up a pretty, big knowledge of different aspects of art and architecture. Well, for this particular course, we ended up with a junior professor who did not appear to have the experience or the knowledge to facilitate learning in a college environment. Well, through the natural discourse, we all came to the same conclusion that there was essentially little we would be able to learn through this course. And what resulted is that we just went through the motions to pass the course and receive our degree. Now, this is not what we want for our learners. We don't want them to go through the motions. We want to actually facilitate learning. So now that we've defined what knowledge means for us, let's put this in action a little bit. For our next point, let's talk about being knowledgeable and having a deep knowledge of a specialized set of skills versus having teaching skills. Well, simply being knowledgeable in an area can actually be a barrier to good instruction. It can hinder the facilitation of learning. Well, how could this be? Well, for one, knowledgeable experts can struggle when communicating simple ideas. Essentially, they have such a deep knowledge of the larger principles of a thing that they are incapable of really empathizing with the lack of knowledge a novice has. Also, experts may lack patience when dealing with novices. It's a term that we've heard throughout this course called the curse of knowledge. And what happens is, again, kind of to our first point, their expertise is such that they can no longer empathize, or they no longer have an idea of just how difficult tasks are that they take for granted. Let's reconsider the driving example from the introduction to this course. We all know how to drive, but there are some intricate details that I'm sure we all take for granted that our 14 and 15-year-olds would probably find very challenging. Now, to overcome this barrier, it's important for us to begin viewing knowledge as simply a tool that helps us to become more skilled teachers. Following are two examples of how knowledge can be used as a tool. One, a thorough understanding of a subject that you are teaching can actually encourage participation from students. They see your enthusiasm, they see your interest, they see your knowledge, and it motivates them to want to learn. Secondly, our ability to anticipate the questions and knowing how to answer these questions allows for more effective feedback. Again, this goes back to being able to empathize with learners. We've been in their shoes. We've experienced what they've experienced, so we can anticipate questions that may arise when we have an understanding of what it takes to gain the knowledge that they desire to have. Additionally, credibility is key. Having knowledge of the subject we are teaching gives us credibility that underpins our skills as facilitators. We can have all the teaching skills in the world, but if we have no knowledge of the subject that we are speaking to, we'll lose credibility and thereby lose our audience, again making us ineffective as learning facilitators. Now, for this last segment, I would like to talk about finding the balance between being a knowledgeable expert and being an expert teacher. John Hattie and Gregory Yates define teaching as the art of transmitting knowledge in a way that ensures the learner receives that knowledge. In finding this balance, it becomes our goal to use our knowledge and to use our expertise to build upon our skills that allows us to become expert teachers. Now, like any area of expertise, the level that you attain is largely dependent on the time you commit to dedicated practice in developing the associated skills. So now you may have been asking yourself throughout this presentation, what does being an expert teacher look like? Let's go through a short checklist that I made. Some of the teaching skills that expert teachers develop are effective communication, nonverbal, verbal, and any type of negative or positive cues. Good teachers know how to build relationships. They understand that relationships helps facilitate learning with their students, because then they can meet individual needs of their students. One key is that teachers learn how to recognize learning. Teaching and learning are two different things. It's not always easy to recognize when learning's happened, but it is pertinent that the expert teacher can see and understand when learning either is or is not happening. Authentic assessment. I talked about this in my last presentation. Being able to use analytics or other tools to assess the needs of your students. And then, of course, developing curriculum. Understanding the needs of the course that's being taught and developing a curriculum that addresses those needs and assures that learning is happening. And again, never forget that teaching is our area of expertise. Now, in conclusion, in overcoming the barrier to being an effective teacher, we first defined knowledge and talked about why it's important to being a good teacher. Then we talked about using knowledge to facilitate teaching and the difference between being knowledgeable or a knowledge expert and being an expert teacher. And finally, we talked about some of the tools of the trade of being an expert teacher. I hope this training was helpful for you, and thank you for listening. Please, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact me at my email, benaya.a.wright@gmail.com. Also, if you found this topic interesting, this slide just gives you a short list of some of the references I used to compile this information. Thank you. Have a good evening.